Winning Blueprint presents.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. It's Tuesday. We're back in the lab room a day after we broke down the Super Bowl and talked about everything that transpired on Sunday, leading to the Baltimore Ravens getting the 34-31 victory and becoming Super Bowl champions over the San Francisco 49ers. We devoted all of yesterday basically to the Super Bowl and everything that it entailed, the halftime show, the blackout, all of the things that occurred in the Super Bowl on Sunday. We basically devoted all of yesterday's show. No, not basically. We did devote all of yesterday's show to the Super Bowl, and rightfully so. It's the biggest game of the year in any sport. And again, like I've said before, it transcends cultures, pop culture, whether you're a football fan or you're not, whether you're just tuning in to see Beyonce, whether you're just tuning in to watch the commercials. It seems like the Super Bowl has something for everyone. So today we'll talk about a lot of different things, football related, some things not, and we'll just get into some of the things we might have glossed over or just flat out missed over the last couple of days or yesterday, just because we were focusing in so much on the Super Bowl. So let's talk about some of those things. I'll talk about the Super Bowl really quickly, kind of put a bow on it. It's almost time to move on from that, especially if you're not a Ravens fan. If you're a Ravens fan, you're going to soak this up. You're going to milk this for all it's worth. You're going to be talking about the Super Bowl a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. And look, if I was in your position, if this was the Redskins, yeah, I'd be doing the same thing. So I can't blame the Ravens fans. I can't blame the 49ers fans. Even if you're upset and you're still talking about it, I get it. You made it to the Super Bowl. You deserve to talk about it as long as you would like. So let's talk about the Super Bowl. And I want to talk about the commercials for a second. Man, were those commercials garbage or what? It seems like the commercials are getting worse and worse and worse and worse every single year. And they try to outdo themselves. And I think, honestly, what they're doing is they're trying to outsmart themselves. They're trying to outdo the year before instead of just sticking to what works. We're simple people. The simplest of things make us laugh. The simplest of things grab our attention. And when you get extravagant and you try to go here and you try to go there, you start losing people. Your commercials become less and less entertaining and you're spending more and more money on them. One of the funniest commercials was a very simple commercial. And I don't even remember what it was for, but it was a funny commercial. And it might have been a Taco Bell commercial. I don't even remember what it was. But it was a guy that was from Minnesota, and he was talking in a Jamaican accent. And matter of fact, it was a car commercial. Don't remember what brand it was, but it was a car commercial because every time they drove in the car, everyone started to feel happy. And I think that was the tone and message of the commercial was, be happy. And everyone was talking with a Jamaican accent after they got into the car. And that was the funniest commercial of the Super Bowl, at least for me. There were several others that were okay, but there weren't any real standout home run hit commercials on Super Bowl Sunday. I thought a lot of people struck out. There were a few singles hit, maybe a double here and there. There were no triples, and then I think there was one, maybe two home runs. But there weren't many home runs hit. And I thought the Jamaican commercial with the vehicle was a home run. I thought that the commercial with LeBron, maybe that's a double. But there weren't many commercials that you sat and you said, man, that was a good commercial. Weren't many of them. And to each his own. There are going to be people that love the commercials. But I just thought there was too much of a voodoo kind of implication to a lot of these commercials. Too much of the New Orleans feel. Everyone was playing off of the New Orleans Super Bowl site and using that into their commercial, and I thought that was a mistake. And I'm very overcritical because they spend so much money on these commercials. You're going to spend money, you need to get the right results out of your commercial, and I thought that they did a terrible job this season of really capturing the imagination and the attention of the viewers and the audience, because I know there were several times where I didn't even stick around to watch all of the commercial. I watched the first half of the commercial, it was terrible, and I just walked away and got something to drink. So you got to keep my attention, and I don't think a lot of these commercials did that for me on Super Bowl Sunday. Now, moving right along, let's get into some football news. We'll come back and talk about the Super Bowl a little bit later on in the program. I want to talk about parents here in the lab room for a second. When you become an adult, do you really need your parents speaking on your behalf anymore? You know, it's okay when you're 7 or you're 8 and you're playing in rec league or little league or Pop Warner, and you know your parents are screaming at the top of their lungs supporting you, or they're speaking on your behalf. Hey, that's cool, man. As you get older, though, you kind of grow out of it, and you really don't want your parents speaking up. You start to get that feeling like you're being embarrassed. Hey, you put my son in the game. Look, I'm not going to go for that. You going to put my son in the game. My son ain't going to keep sitting on the bench. Or you have that dad, look, man, you going to put my son in the game. And as a coach, you kind of take a step back like, look, can I just coach my team, please? And you, the player, you feel kind of embarrassed. Like, you get to that age where you're like, stop it, Mom, you're embarrassing me. You know, you get to that age like, come on, cut it out. What is the cutoff limit for that? Because you see it all the time in the National Football League, parents speaking up on behalf of their children. And look, in your eyes, your child will always be your child. He'll always be your little book, and he'll always be 8 years old in your eyes. But at what point do you say, all right, time for me to keep my mouth shut and let good old Teddy handle his own business? Right now, I'm talking about Ted Ginn Jr. Recently, his dad came out and said, look, it's time for my son to move on. He's not being utilized correctly in San Francisco. He needs to find a new home. How about you let Ted decide that? It's okay. I know you want to see what's best for your son. And yeah, he's not getting a lot of shine and a lot of playing time, especially on offense in San Francisco. But the fact of the matter is, Ted Ginn Jr. is not that good of a wide receiver in the National Football League. It's been seen. It's been chronicled. He's okay, but he's no world beater. And so his niche in the league has been carved out basically already. He's a return man. He's a return specialist, which is what he did in San Francisco. Now he's being phased out of that as well. So yeah, it's probably time for him to move on. But don't you think you need to let Ted decide that? He doesn't need you speaking on his behalf. And it's funny how all these parents love to do this. How old is Ted again? Isn't Ted like 26 or 27 or 28 years old? Do you really need to be speaking on his behalf anymore? I think Ted can handle this. And I thought that Ted really took the high road when asked questions on Media Day during Super Bowl week about his usage in the San Francisco 49ers offense or the lack thereof. And does he feel slighted? Does he feel like he's being underutilized? And he just took the high road and said, you know what? I'm going to basically do whatever they ask me to do. And when my time comes, I'll make something happen, is essentially what he said. And that's the way to go about it. I mean, his dad wanted him to go up there and really voice his displeasure with what has been going on in San Francisco. But again, you don't need any distractions. You don't need guys really running off at the mouth, talking about this and that, and taking away from the game and the preparation and the attention that needs to be focused on getting it done. And kudos to Ted Ginn Jr. for not allowing his dad or the media to bait him into saying something that would have done that. And look, his time will come. If someone else feels like Ted Ginn can be an asset to their offense or their special teams game, they'll give him a deal and he'll move on. And I'm pretty sure that's what will happen in the offseason, someone who will need a boost to their special teams unit, will give Ted Ginn Jr. an opportunity. He can help you on special teams. I don't know as much as on offense, but I know in the return game, punt return, kickoff return, Ted Ginn Jr. can be an asset. Now, he's a straight line runner. And what I mean by that is he's not a guy with a lot of wiggle. From point A to point B in a straight line, there's not many in the league that are going to catch Ted Ginn Jr. from behind. He's got straight line speed. Running straight without having to shift left or right, he's as fast as they come in the National Football League. But when you ask him to give a little wiggle or change direction on the fly, that's not Ted Ginn Jr.'s strong suit. Moving laterally, not what Ted Ginn Jr. really wants to do. But if you allow him to hit a seam without having to stop and just run full speed, not going to catch him. And so someone will really seek out the services of Ted Ginn Jr. in free agency because, like I said, he has a lot to offer in the return game for someone, and he'll get an opportunity, but his dad need not comment on the happenings of his son. His son can do all the vouching for himself that he needs to do. So, a couple of players have been released officially, and we've seen it and known it was coming for a while, but it was just recently done. First up, Titus Young. Man, is this guy a piece of work or what? And I really don't want to call him names because I really think that there's something wrong with him. Like mentally, chemically imbalanced wrong with Titus Young. I think that there's a mental issue with him. And so I don't really want to poke fun at him. I really don't want to call him names. I really don't want to rag on him because there's something wrong. He needs help. And so until he gets that help, I really don't want to go there with him. But when he makes comments like the one he just made, that he's better than Calvin Johnson, he hammers the point home. Yeah, something's wrong with this guy. And his high school coach is talking to him and he's saying, you really feel like you're just as good as Calvin Johnson? He said, yeah, man, I'm just as good as him. Matter of fact, I'm better than him. No, you're not. Yes, I am better than him. No, you're not. And his coach is telling him, no, you're not better than him. Come on, man. Be serious. Be for real. You really think you're as good as Calvin Johnson? Man, I'm better than him. And his coach is sitting there trying to rationalize. You can't rationalize with crazy. You can't do it. And so I feel your pain talking to his college coach. I feel your pain, but he's saying that he's better than the most physically imposing receiver, not just in the league now, in NFL history. The man that just broke the single season receiving yards record, Calvin Johnson, Megatron. He's saying that he's better than him. That's the kind of delusional talk right there that has him off of this Detroit Lions roster officially. Because of comments like that. He's not in his right mind. And you can't put up with that. I don't know what other team is going to give him a shot. I thought the Lions were going to string it along. I thought they were going to jerk him along because he deserved it. He deserved to have the Lions hold on to him until the last conceivable moment and then cut ties with him so that he couldn't latch on with another team. But the Lions said, look, we can't have our name associated with this any longer. We can't have our franchise, our face rubbed in the dirt anymore because he's really making us look bad as a franchise. We have to separate ourselves from him, distance ourselves from this whole situation, this whole ordeal, and move on. And so they just cut ties with him. Good for the Detroit Lions. They should have done it sooner, but there's no reforming a guy like this until he gets the medical help that he needs. He needs mental attention. And there's going to be some team, some franchise out there that thinks that they can reform him. They think they have the Midas touch. I can get the most out of Titus Young. There's going to be one delusional franchise out there that thinks that they can get it done. That they have enough veterans in the locker room that'll be able to get this guy on a straight and narrow and get him to straighten up and fly right. There's going to be some franchise out there that thinks they can help him. And they're wrong. Titus Young can't be helped until he gets the actual help that he needs. And so it's a very disappointing situation because he's a guy that's very talented. There's no doubt about it. But at what point do you decide that the talent isn't worth the headache? Because If he couldn't fit in a locker room like Detroit that's full of bad apples, he was just one of many bad apples. They were willing to put up with his shenanigans. They were willing to put up with his theatrics in Detroit. And he couldn't even last there because he was doing too much. He was starting to stand out more than the rest of the rotten apples in Detroit. Their head coach isn't wrapped too tight. And so he was willing to put up with this. But even he had enough. Even his cup was full. And they had to get rid of Titus Young. So if Detroit couldn't allow him to stay in their locker room, and their locker room is full of guys who aren't doing what they need to do. If he couldn't last in Detroit, what makes you think he can last in your locker room? Whose locker room is strong enough with enough veteran presence to have a guy come in and actually talk to him and have him listen? Who do you have in your locker room who is patient enough to work with this guy? Because I'm telling you right now, he's a knucklehead and he's not going to listen to a word of what you're saying. He couldn't wait in Detroit for the ball to come his way. In a place where they're starving for a number 2, a number 3 receiver. Anything other than Calvin Johnson. They're starving for someone to be opposite of Calvin Johnson. He was going to get his fair share of footballs thrown in his direction. In a place like that, what makes you think that you're going to be able to have Titus Young come in and conform to your locker room and wait for the ball to come his way? If he was greedy, selfish in Detroit, what makes you think he's not going to do that and implode in your locker room? If I was an NFL franchise, I wouldn't go near Titus Young with a 10-foot pole. And I know there's going to be a few franchises out there that think they can get him to change, get him to see the error in his ways, and get him to be a productive football player. But I highly doubt that. And if you take a chance on him, you will regret it. Until he gets the help that he needs, I don't see why you would run the risk of blowing up any continuity, any kind of chemistry you have in your locker room by bringing in this cancer named Titus Young. That's just my personal opinion. If you have an NFL franchise and you need receiver help, go in the free agent market. Look for a guy that's going to come in and be a glue guy. Go in the draft. Find a young player that you can mold into the player that you want him to be. But don't take a chance on a guy that's going to come in and be all about himself. You see that it's all about Titus Young and no one else. Why bring that into your locker room? Unless he gets the help and you can confirm that he's on medication and he's already seeked out the help that he needs to help correct his situation, you don't need to allow Titus Young to come in and really destroy your locker room because that's what he's going to do. And the other player that was recently released was Chris Rainey from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is the type of move that makes you respect the Steelers even more. This is the type of move that separates the Pittsburgh Steelers from every other franchise in the National Football League. This is why the Steelers are better than everyone else. Because they don't take any nonsense, any off-the-field behavior that's contrary to what the Steelers believe in. You have to be not only a good football player, but you have to be a good person. And if you're not, the Steelers won't condone your behavior. If Ben Roethlisberger wasn't a franchise quarterback, trust me, he'd have been long gone off of this Pittsburgh Steelers roster because they don't stand for that kind of behavior off the field. Anything that's detrimental to the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise is frowned upon. And you'll find yourself with a one-way ticket out of Pittsburgh. Where you land is of no concern to them, but you won't be a Steeler. Keep in mind, this isn't just Chris Rainey. Remember what happened with Santonio Holmes. He was their most productive receiver. Keep in mind, Super Bowl 43, that was all Santonio Holmes. They don't win Super Bowl 43 without Santonio Holmes making all of the plays in that game and being basically the Super Bowl MVP. They don't get it done without Santonio Holmes. And he gets in trouble in the offseason, and they shed themselves and really rid themselves of Santonio Holmes. They don't stand for that nonsense in Pittsburgh. They're different. They get it. And Chris Rainey wants to slap around his girlfriend. The Steelers said, we don't want any part of that. That's not the Steeler way. And he's gone. And the Steelers know they need speed in their backfield. They don't have any speed. He was the one guy that posed the threat in that backfield that could take it the distance anytime he touched the ball out of that backfield. They don't care. We'll find another running back that can run a 4.340 or 4.440. We'll find another guy that knows how to act on and off the field that can still run. But you won't get an exception because you're fast. You can go do that elsewhere. And that's why you got to love the Steelers. Chris Rainey can't behave himself off the field. You won't be rewarded on it. You won't be rewarded by being able to be called a Pittsburgh Steeler. Go find yourself another franchise to do that with. You won't do it here. That's why you have to love and respect the Steelers. If you don't like the Steelers, even if you hate the Steelers, you got to respect that. That's as blunt and as profound as it gets. You're either a Steeler or you're not. And that's on and off the field. And so Chris Rainey, he didn't fill out the application well enough to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. He filled out the application and then they went back and double checked and found out that he was lying. So he has to go. He's been terminated on the spot. And that's the Steelers' way. You're not going to come into Pittsburgh and do what you want to do. They have a system in place, and that's why this team has more Super Bowl titles than anyone else. Because they do it a certain way. And they do it better than anyone else. And so Chris Rainey is no longer a Pittsburgh Steeler. Officially. So, that's going to do it for today's program. I thank you for joining me here in the lab room. Throw it up. It's a touchdown. Throw it up. Don't be afraid. We'll tack on this quick extra point. I talked about commercials earlier, and I just need to add on one more. There was one more home run. Remember I told you it was about 2 home runs? Couldn't really think of what the other one was off the top of my head. Leon Sandcastle, the Deion Sanders commercial. That was hilarious. That was a great commercial. Again, very simple, nothing extravagant, really straight to the point. You hit a home run. When you try to go over the top and do all of these extra things, that's when you lose. That's when you strike out. When you try too hard and you squeeze the bat extremely hard, that's when you strike out. That's why you always see batters up there with their fingers and they're flexing them because they're relaxed. They want to relax. And when you relax and just make a commercial that the average Joe can relate to, that's when you hit a home run. When you want to go over the top with all these voodoo type of props and you want to use the voodoo concept, that's when you strike out. Because you're trying too hard. You're trying to make me think too much. I just want to see a funny commercial. I just want to see a commercial that's entertaining. So, let's talk about the CBS coverage and then we'll get out of here of the Super Bowl. And for the most part, it was okay. I give them a C+. I was very disappointed with CBS's coverage of the Super Bowl for several reasons. And they were petty, but they're my reasons. And so what may be petty to you is a big deal to me. Because I'm very particular in what I want to see. And they caught a lot of grief and a lot of flack for allowing Joe Flacco to drop that F-bomb on the network. But look, I don't really care about that. Because in the course of watching football throughout a regular season, you're going to hear 6 or 7, maybe 10 F-bombs or curse words, period. Because you're always going to catch a mic that's on, whether it be on an official or you got the sideline mic and you got a guy chirping at another player or you got a coach talking. You always catch a guy, man, you gonna get that on my face, and the mic is just right there and it catches it. I hear it all the time. Or an official turns on his little mic on his hip and there's a guy talking to somebody and you hear him out of the corner of the screen. Yeah, you're going to hear curse words. It happens. It's a part of the game. And CBS caught a lot of flack when Joe Flacco, after the Super Bowl was over, was caught saying, man, this is effing awesome. It happens. I was more disappointed in their coverage because Jacoby Jones scored 2 touchdowns. Each time he scored a touchdown, they shot away from him doing his touchdown celebration. I want to see the touchdown celebrations. It's not like he's Randy Moss or some guy that's unpredictable and he might do something stupid and you're not sure, so you just cut away. Jacoby Jones is an entertaining dancer when he scores a touchdown. I want to see the whole dance. He did a Ray Lewis compilation type of dance was mixed up with his own flavor on it. And we didn't even get to see the whole thing because CBS, and I don't know what their explanation was for this, cut away from it. I don't want to see Joe Flacco and some offensive lineman high-fiving. I want to see the touchdown dance. And then you think that they play it back and allow us to see it in full. Every time you get right to where the dance is about to commence, they cut it off. Shame on you, CBS. Fox wouldn't do that. I tell you that much. Fox would let me see the whole celebration. Jerks. And so that was my biggest gripe. It wasn't anything actually related to the game per se. It's something cosmetic off to the side. But that's still my gripe. And I knock you down a whole letter grade for that. Because I'm not a CBS guy. I'm an NFC guy, so I'm a Fox guy first and foremost anyway. And I thought Jim Nantz did a great job. I'm not a Phil Simms guy. Phil Simms states the obvious too much. He's wrong a lot of times, and he really doesn't like when he's wrong. Like on the challenge by Jim Harbaugh, he was like, oh, Jim Harbaugh's wrong. He was so animated. He's wrong. Hey, this is a bad challenge. They already used the timeout. He can't afford to do it. Anyone watching the game that was paying attention could tell that that was a terrible spot, and that if Harbaugh challenged, he would win. It would be third down. Now, the Ravens ultimately picked it up with a gutsy call on third down, having Flacco throw it 20 yards down the field to Anquan Bolden, who snatched it out of the air. But that's besides the point. The point was Phil Simms was flat out wrong, and he does that too often. He's wrong, and then he comes back and he's like, hey, Jim Harbaugh was perfectly fine for doing that. He was right. Yeah, you're right. He was right. You were wrong. And I feel like of all the analysts that are ex-quarterbacks or ex-players, he's the one analyst that overstates the obvious. Thanks for telling me something I already knew, Phil. Thanks. So, by virtue of Phil Simms, I knocked that down another letter grade, and that's how you get a C+. You didn't show me the touchdown dances, and Phil Simms is doing a game, so you get a C+. And that's going to do it for this program. Thank you for joining me here on the program. Got to a lot today. It was a fun program. Want to see you back here later on as we get back into the lab follow-up. We didn't touch on anything yesterday. We didn't get into any teams because it was all about the Super Bowl yesterday. And I didn't want to take away from the Super Bowl and post something else. I just wanted to stick to the Super Bowl, and then we would pick up where we left off last week with our lab follow-up. So stay tuned. Today we'll be doing the Cincinnati Bengals here on the lab follow-up, and we'll be talking Cincinnati Bengals football. And at some point in the week, we'll do two of them, and we'll double up and have a double header with the lab follow-ups. So I'll let you know when that's coming, but it will be sometime this week. But stay tuned for the Cincinnati Bengals lab follow-up. I thank you for joining me. Many ways to view or contact the show. There's Facebook. In the Lab Room is the Facebook page. Like me on Facebook. There's Twitter. @In the Lab Room is the Twitter handle. Follow me on Twitter. There's YouTube. Louis T is the page. Subscribe to the page. Every video I've ever done is on the YouTube page. And then there's the inbox. Every single one of those social media sites, if you access it, comes directly to the inbox. If you just want to send something to the inbox directly yourself, inthelabroom@gmail.com is the inbox. Again, thank you for joining me today. Got to a lot of issues, touched on a lot of things. We'll be back tomorrow here in the Lab Room. Want to see you back here, same time, same place. As always, enjoy yourself. Have a good one. Take care. See you here in the Lab Room tomorrow. Have a good one.